The Forgotten Alley. The late afternoon sun blazed down on the crumbling streets of the old neighborhood. Derek trudged home from school, his threadbare backpack hanging loosely from his small frame. His sneakers, worn at the soles, kicked up little puffs of dust as he walked. Around him, the neighborhood seemed as tired as he felt: faded paint on buildings, broken fences leaning precariously, and potholes that threatened to swallow cars whole. At 12 years old, Derek was already well acquainted with the weight of the world. He didn't have time for childhood whims, even though he longed for a simpler life. His family's struggles were written into every crack of their small, decaying house, and every line etched into his mother's weary face. As Derek rounded the corner near his street, his steps slowed. The smell of sizzling food from a vendor's cart filled the air, and his stomach growled in protest. He hadn't eaten much that day: a slice of dry bread for breakfast, and a school lunch he had split with his little sister, Nia. He lingered near the cart for a moment, watching the vendor flip golden fritters over bubbling oil. The scent made his hunger more acute, but his pockets were empty. With a resigned sigh, he moved on. When he reached his house, the sight of peeling paint and broken shingles greeted him. Derek stood at the gate, gripping the rusted metal tightly. The muffled sound of his sister's laughter drifted through the open window, momentarily lifting his spirits. It was a sound he cherished, a fragile spark of joy in an otherwise bleak reality. Pushing the gate open, Derek walked up the cracked path to the front door. He hesitated before going inside, steeling himself for whatever awaited him. As he stepped into the tiny living room, his mother's voice reached his ears. She was on the phone, her tone low and strained. "I just need more time," Maria pleaded. "Please, one more week. I'll have the money. I promise." Derek's heart sank as he heard her desperate words. It was the same conversation she'd been having for weeks now, with the landlord, the electric company, and anyone else who wouldn't take "we're struggling" as an excuse. He set his bag down quietly, not wanting to interrupt, and headed to the bedroom he shared with Nia. Inside, his little sister was sitting cross-legged on the floor, humming a tune as she stitched a piece of fabric onto her old, worn-out doll. She looked up when Derek entered, her face lighting up with a big smile. "Derek, look, I made a new dress for Leela," she exclaimed, holding up the doll proudly. "That's amazing, Nia," Derek said, forcing a smile. He ruffled her hair and sat down beside her, watching her work. Nia's innocence was both a blessing and a burden. She didn't understand the gravity of their situation, and Derek was determined to keep it that way. As Nia chattered on about her imaginary adventures with Layla, Derek's mind drifted back to the kitchen. He could hear his mother's voice growing more frantic, the stress evident in every syllable. The rent was due again, and Derek knew they were already behind. He clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. He was only a kid, but he hated feeling so powerless. That night, after Nia had fallen asleep, Derek lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The faint glow of a streetlight seeped through the thin curtains, casting shadows on the walls. He could hear his mother in the next room, pacing back and forth. The sound of her footsteps was steady, almost rhythmic, but it carried a weight that made his chest tighten. "I have to do something," Derek whispered to himself. He didn't know what yet, but the thought of his family being forced out of their home was unbearable. The next morning, Derek woke up early, his resolve steeling. He wolfed down a piece of bread Maria handed him and kissed Nia on the forehead before heading out the door. His plan was simple: find odd jobs around the neighborhood. Anything that could bring in a few extra dollars. He started by knocking on doors, asking if anyone needed help with chores or errands. At first, the responses were polite but dismissive. "Not today, sweetheart," one elderly woman said with a kind smile. Others didn't even bother opening the door. By midday, Derek's feet ached, and his spirits were low. He leaned against a lamppost, wiping sweat from his brow, when he heard a commotion nearby. Curiosity piqued, Derek followed the noise to a narrow alley just off the main road. There, a group of kids about his age were crowded around an overturned cart. The vendor, a frail old man, was on the ground, struggling to collect his scattered produce. The kids were laughing, tossing apples back and forth like it was a game. "Hey, stop that!" Derek shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. The kids turned to him, their expressions shifting from amusement to annoyance. "What's it to you?" One of them sneered. "It's not yours." "Leave him alone," Derek said, stepping closer. The group hesitated for a moment before deciding Derek wasn't worth the trouble. They dropped the fruit and sauntered off, muttering insults under their breath. Derek ignored them and knelt beside the old man. "Are you okay?" he asked, helping the man sit up. The vendor nodded, his hands trembling as he adjusted his glasses. "Thank you, boy. They just came out of nowhere. Took me by surprise." Derek began picking up the scattered produce, carefully placing it back in the cart. Some of it was bruised, but he gathered every piece he could find. When he was done, he stood up and dusted off his hands. "Do you need help getting home?" Derek asked. The old man shook his head. "No, I'll manage. You've already done more than enough. Thank you, truly." As the vendor shuffled away, Derek felt a small sense of pride. It wasn't much, but he had made a difference, however small. He returned to his search for work, but the rest of the day was fruitless. By the time he got home, the sun was setting, and his stomach was growling. Maria was sitting at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. Derek could tell she had been crying again, though she quickly wiped her face when she saw him. "How was your day?" she asked, forcing a smile. "Okay," Derek replied. He didn't tell her about the old man or the kids in the alley. It didn't seem important compared to everything else they were dealing with. After dinner, Derek sat with Nia, helping her draw pictures with the stub of a crayon they had left. For a little while, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. But as the night wore on, the reality of their situation crept back in. They were running out of time, and Derek didn't know how much longer they could hold on. Little did he know, the events of the next day would change everything. The black limousine. The following morning began like any other. Derek woke early, the thin blanket barely keeping the morning chill at bay. The faint light of dawn filtered through the broken blinds, casting pale beams across the room. He could hear Nia stirring in her bed, her soft murmurs as she woke from a dream. Derek stretched and rubbed his eyes, already thinking about how he could make the day count. There had to be a way to help his family, something he hadn't thought of yet. Maria was in the kitchen, her movements slow and deliberate as she prepared breakfast. She placed a plate with 2 slices of toast on the table and gestured for Derek and Nia to sit. "That's all we've got for now," she said apologetically, her voice heavy with guilt. "It's enough, Mom," Derek replied, taking a slice and offering Nia the bigger piece. Nia giggled, unaware of the sacrifice, and happily munched on her toast. Derek smiled at her, but inside, he was a storm of emotions. He hated seeing his mother struggle, hated the way her eyes looked more tired every day. He hated feeling like a burden, even though he knew it wasn't his fault. After breakfast, Maria left for work, reminding Derek to look after Nia and be careful while she was out. Derek nodded and promised to keep an eye on his sister. Once Maria was gone, Derek helped Nia dress and gave her some crayons to keep her occupied. Then he sat by the window, staring out at the cracked pavement and the crumbling neighborhood. His mind raced with plans, most of them impractical or too ambitious for a 12-year-old boy. It was mid-morning when the sound of a car engine broke the monotony of the day. Derek looked up and froze. Coming down the street was a sleek, black limousine, a vehicle so out of place in their rundown neighborhood that it seemed almost surreal. The car moved slowly, its polished surface gleaming in the sunlight. Neighbors peeked out of windows and doors, whispering to one another in confusion. Cars like that didn't belong here. The limousine came to a stop right in front of Derek's house. Derek's heart began to race. He didn't know why, but the sight of that car made him uneasy. The tinted windows revealed nothing of the occupants inside, and for a moment, everything was still. Then the back door opened. A man in a crisp black suit stepped out, his movements smooth and precise. He was tall, with sharp features, and a no-nonsense demeanor. His eyes scanned the neighborhood briefly before landing on Derek, who was still sitting by the window. The man adjusted his tie and began walking toward the house. "Derek," Nia called, tugging at his shirt. "Who's that?" "I don't know," Derek replied, his voice barely above a whisper. His stomach twisted in knots as he stood up and moved toward the door. He opened it just as the man reached the front steps. "Good morning," the man said, his voice calm and polite. "Are you Derek?" Derek hesitated before nodding. "Yes, sir." The man smiled faintly and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a sleek black business card. He handed it to Derek, who took it with trembling hands. "My name is Mr. Whittaker," the man said. "I work for someone who was deeply moved by your actions yesterday." Derek's brow furrowed in confusion. "My actions?" "The man you helped on the street," Mr. Whittaker clarified. "He spoke very highly of you. He said you saved his life." Derek's eyes widened. He had almost forgotten about the old man in the wheelchair. To him, it had been the right thing to do, nothing extraordinary. He hadn't expected anything in return. "I didn't do it for anything," Derek said quickly, feeling a wave of nervousness. I just wanted to help." Mr. Whittaker's expression softened, and he nodded. "That's precisely why he wanted me to find you." Derek was about to ask more when Mr. Whittaker gestured toward the limousine. "If you wouldn't mind, Derek, my employer would like to meet you. It won't take long, and your sister is welcome to come as well." Derek hesitated, his protective instincts kicking in. He didn't trust strangers, especially ones who showed up in fancy cars. But there was something sincere about Mr. Whittaker's demeanor. Before he could decide, Nia tugged on his arm. "Can we go, Derek?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Please." Derek sighed. He couldn't say no to her. He turned back to Mr. Whittaker. "Okay, but just for a little while." "Of course," Mr. Whittaker said, stepping aside to let them pass. He opened the limousine door for them, and Derek helped Nia climb inside before following her. The interior of the car was unlike anything Derek had ever seen. The seats were plush leather, and there was a faint scent of something expensive, like cologne or fresh flowers. Nia's eyes sparkled as she ran her hands over the armrests, marveling at the luxury. The car began to move, and Derek's nerves returned. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice firm. "To meet my employer," Mr. Whittaker replied. "He has something he'd like to discuss with you." The car wound through the streets of the city, leaving the familiar surroundings of Derek's neighborhood far behind. As the buildings grew taller and the roads smoother, Derek felt more out of place. He kept a protective arm around Nia, who was too busy enjoying the ride to notice his unease. Eventually, the limousine pulled into the driveway of a sprawling estate. The house was enormous, with pristine white walls and large windows that gleamed in the sunlight. A manicured garden surrounded the property, complete with a fountain that sparkled like it was made of diamonds. Derek and Nia stepped out of the car, their eyes wide as they took in the opulence. Mr. Whittaker led them up the stone steps to the front door, which opened automatically as they approached. Inside, the air was cool and filled with the faint scent of lavender. "Right this way," Mr. Whittaker said, guiding them down a long hallway. The walls were lined with paintings and photographs, each more impressive than the last. Derek couldn't help but feel small in a place like this, like he didn't belong. They entered a large sitting room where an elderly man was waiting. He was seated in a high-backed chair, a warm smile on his face. Derek recognized him immediately. It was the man he had saved in the street. "Young man," the old man said, his voice filled with gratitude. "It's good to see you again." Derek nodded, unsure of what to say. He shifted uncomfortably, but the man's smile put him somewhat at ease. "Please sit," the man said, gesturing to the sofa across from him. Derek and Nia sat down, and Mr. Whittaker stood nearby, his hands clasped behind his back. "I wanted to thank you properly for what you did," the old man continued. "You saved my life yesterday. If you hadn't come along when you did—" "It was nothing," Derek interrupted, feeling his cheeks flush. I couldn't leave you there." The man chuckled softly. "Humility. That's a rare trait these days. But it wasn't nothing, Derek. It was everything." Derek glanced at Nia, who was staring at the man with wide eyes. He looked back at the old man, unsure of what to say. "I'd like to do something for you and your family," the man said, his expression growing serious. "Something that might help ease the burdens you carry." Derek's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what the man meant, but the sincerity in his voice made him believe it was something big. For the first time in a long while, hope flickered in Derek's chest. But he didn't know that this meeting was only the beginning. The weight of a decision. Malik sat in the back of the luxurious car, clutching the slip of paper Mr. Hargrove had given him. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the enormity of what had just happened. His thoughts swirled as he replayed Mr. Hargrove's words in his mind. "Your rent is covered for 6 months. A scholarship to a prestigious school. A safer neighborhood for your family." It sounded like a dream, one so good it felt impossible. Malik glanced out the tinted window at his neighborhood as the car rolled slowly down the street. Kids played barefoot on the cracked pavement, their laughter mingling with the distant blare of music from an open window. Women sat on stoops, chatting, while older men gathered around a game of dominoes. This was home. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was all he'd ever known. The car came to a gentle stop in front of his apartment building, drawing curious stares from his neighbors. The suited man from earlier stepped out and opened the door for Malik. "Take your time," he said with a professional nod, as if sensing Malik's hesitation. Malik stepped out, the paper still clutched in his hand. The door closed behind him, and the sleek car pulled away. For a moment, he stood there, overwhelmed, as the reality of his situation settled over him like a heavy blanket. "Malik," a voice called out. He turned to see Mrs. Jenkins, their elderly neighbor, hobbling toward him with her cane. Her gray hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her wrinkled face was alive with curiosity. What was that fancy car doing here? Nothing, Mrs. Jenkins," Malik said quickly, stuffing the paper into his pocket. "Just someone I helped the other day." Mrs. Jenkins narrowed her eyes but smiled. "Well, it must have been something big for them to come all the way here. You take care of yourself now." "Yes, Mom," Malik replied, managing a small smile. He hurried inside before anyone else could question him. Inside, Malik found Layla sitting on the floor with her doll. As usual, she looked up and beamed at him. "Malik, look, I made Tina a new hat." "That's great, Layla," Malik said, ruffling her hair. "Where's Mom?" "She's in the kitchen," Layla said, returning her focus to her doll. Malik made his way to the kitchen, where his mom was chopping vegetables for dinner. The strain on her face was evident. Her eyes had dark circles beneath them, and her hands moved with a mechanical precision that spoke of sheer exhaustion. "Hey, Mom," Malik said, leaning against the doorway. Janice looked up and smiled faintly. "Hey, baby. How was school?" "Same as usual," Malik said, hesitating. His fingers brushed against the paper in his pocket. Mom, can I talk to you about something?" "Sure," Janice said, setting the knife down and wiping her hands on a towel. "What's on your mind?" Malik took a deep breath and pulled out the slip of paper. He handed it to her, watching her expression shift from confusion to shock as she read the note. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Malik, what is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's from a man I helped the other day," Malik explained, his words tumbling out in a rush. "He said I saved his life, and now he wants to help us. He paid our rent for 6 months, Mom. 6 months." Janice sank into a chair, staring at the paper as if it might disappear. This can't be real," she said, shaking her head. "People don't just do things like this." "I know," Malik said, sitting across from her, "but he was serious, Mom. He even offered me a scholarship to a private school. And he said he could help us move to a better neighborhood." Janice looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "A scholarship? A new home? Malik, it's too much. What's the catch?" "There's no catch," Malik insisted. "He just wants to help. He said I reminded him that kindness still exists. That's it." Janice's hand shook as she set the paper down. She stared at the table, her thoughts clearly racing. "Malik, I don't know. I don't know if we can trust it." Malik's heart sank. He understood her hesitation. Life had taught them both to be cautious, to question anything that seemed too good to be true. But he also knew they couldn't afford to turn down an opportunity like this. "Mom," he said quietly, "we don't have many options. This could be our chance to start over, to have a better life. For you, for Layla, for all of us." Janice looked at him, tears brimming in her eyes. She reached across the table and took his hand. "You're so grown up, Malik. Too grown up for your age. I don't want to see you get hurt." "I won't, Mom," Malik said firmly. "We can trust him. I can feel it." That night, Malik lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He could hear his mom moving around in the kitchen, her footsteps soft against the worn linoleum. He knew she was still wrestling with the decision, and he couldn't blame her. It was a lot to process. But for Malik, the choice was clear. This was their chance to escape the cycle of struggle and hardship. It wasn't just about the rent or the scholarship. It was about hope. For the first time, Malik could see a future where they weren't just surviving but thriving. He thought about Layla, who deserved more than hand-me-down toys and makeshift doll dresses. He thought about his mom, who worked herself to the bone just to keep a roof over their heads. And he thought about himself, a boy with big dreams and even bigger obstacles. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, but it also fueled his determination. He wouldn't let this opportunity slip through their fingers. The next morning, Malik woke to the sound of his mom's voice. She was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. He sat up, straining to hear. "Yes, Mr. Hargrove," she was saying. I thought about it, and I think we're ready to accept your help." Malik's heart soared. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and hurried to the kitchen. Janice hung up just as he entered, her face a mix of relief and nervousness. "Mom?" Malik asked. She turned to him and smiled. A real, genuine smile that he hadn't seen in a long time. "We're doing it, Malik," she said. "We're taking the help. All of it." Malik grinned, his chest swelling with pride and excitement. He hugged her tightly, feeling a spark of hope ignite within him. For the first time in years, the future felt bright. That afternoon, the black car returned. This time, when Malik climbed inside, he wasn't alone. His mom and Layla sat beside him, their faces full of wonder and anticipation. As the car pulled away from their old neighborhood, Malik looked out the window one last time. The cracked streets, the faded houses, the kids playing soccer in the dusty lot. It was all part of him, part of who he was. But now, he was moving forward, toward something better. As the car drove on, Malik felt a sense of peace wash over him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. They were no longer alone. They had hope. And for now, that was enough. A new beginning. The Jefferson family's life changed almost overnight, though not without moments of hesitation and adjustment. When the black car stopped in front of their old apartment for the final time, it wasn't just a simple relocation. It was the closing of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. Malik, Janice, and Layla stood on the cracked pavement, staring at the sleek vehicle that would take them to a new home. "Are you sure this is real, Mom?" Layla asked, clutching her doll tightly. Her wide eyes flickered between the car and her mother's face, a mixture of excitement and fear bubbling within her. "It's real, baby," Janice said softly, brushing a curl from Layla's forehead. "And it's all because of your big brother." She turned to Malik, her gaze filled with a pride he hadn't seen in years. "You did this for us." Malik shifted uncomfortably under her praise. "I just helped someone, Mom. That's all." Janice crouched down and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes, Malik, doing the right thing is the hardest and most important thing you can do. You showed courage when it mattered most. Never forget that." Malik nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He wasn't used to compliments, especially not ones that felt so heavy with meaning. As the car wound its way through unfamiliar streets, the scenery began to change. The dilapidated buildings and narrow alleyways of Ashwood gave way to wider roads lined with tall trees and well-kept homes. Malik pressed his face to the window, watching in awe as neatly trimmed lawns and colorful flower beds rolled by. It was like stepping into another world, a world he'd only ever seen on TV. Layla gasped. "Look at the houses, Malik. They're so big." Malik smiled at her excitement. "Yeah, they are." Janice sat quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She kept glancing out the window, her expression unreadable. Malik could tell she was struggling to let herself believe this was real. The car slowed to a stop in front of a two-story house with a bright red door and a porch swing that creaked gently in the breeze. The yard was lush and green, the kind of yard where Malik could imagine playing soccer with Layla or just lying in the grass, staring up at the sky. "This is it," the driver announced, stepping out to open their door. "Welcome to your new home." The Jefferson family stepped out of the car, their eyes wide with disbelief. A woman in a crisp blazer stood on the porch, a warm smile on her face. "Hello, Jefferson family," she said, extending a hand to Janice. "I'm Sarah Martin. Mr. Hargrove asked me to help you settle in. This house is yours now." "Ours?" Janice repeated, her voice trembling. "You mean we don't have to pay rent?" Sarah shook her head. "It's been taken care of. Mr. Hargrove believes you deserve a fresh start, and this home is part of that." Janice's knees buckled, and Malik rushed to steady her. She clung to him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to thank him," she whispered. "I don't even know how to begin." Sarah placed a gentle hand on her arm. "You've already thanked him by raising such a courageous son. Now let's get you settled." The house was everything they'd ever dreamed of and more. The living room was spacious and filled with light, with large windows that overlooked the front yard. The kitchen had shiny appliances Malik had only seen in magazines, and the bedrooms were cozy and inviting. Layla squealed with delight when she saw her room, which had pink walls and a small desk for her crafts. "Malik, look," she cried, spinning around in the center of the room. "It's so pretty." Malik grinned. "Yeah, it is. This whole place is pretty cool." His own room was simple but perfect. The bed was big and soft, and there was even a small shelf where he could put his books and soccer trophies, if he ever earned any. For the first time in his life, he had a space that felt truly his. Later that evening, as the family sat around their new dining table eating pizza provided by Sarah, Janice spoke up. "I still can't believe this is happening," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "It feels like a dream." "It's real, Mom," Malik said. "We're really here." Janice reached across the table and took his hand. "Malik, I know I said this before, but I need you to understand how proud I am of you. You've given us a chance to start over. I'll never forget that." Malik's chest swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. For so long, he felt powerless to help his family. Now, for the first time, he felt like he'd made a real difference. The next day, Sarah returned to take Malik and Janice to visit Malik's new school. It was a sprawling campus with modern buildings, lush green fields, and a state-of-the-art soccer pitch. Malik's heart raced as he took it all in. "This is where I'll be going to school?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's right," Sarah said with a smile. "Mr. Hargrove wanted to make sure you had access to the best education and opportunities." Malik couldn't believe it. The classrooms were filled with bright posters and new desks, and the teachers seemed kind and welcoming. But it was the soccer field that captured his attention. He could already picture himself running across the grass, scoring goals, and maybe even wearing a real uniform someday. As they walked back to the car, Malik turned to Sarah. "Why is Mr. Hargrove doing all this for us?" Sarah's smile softened. "Mr. Hargrove believes in paying kindness forward. He told me that you reminded him of the kind of person he used to be. Someone who believes in doing the right thing, no matter how hard it is. He sees potential in you, Malik, and he wants to give you the tools to succeed." Malik nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. He still wasn't sure he deserved all this, but he was determined to prove Mr. Hargrove right. That evening, Malik sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. Layla played in the yard, her laughter ringing out like music, while Janice stood in the doorway, smiling softly. Malik closed his eyes and let the cool breeze wash over him. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't dared to feel before: hope. Their journey wasn't over, but for now, they had a chance to dream again. And Malik was ready to work hard to make those dreams a reality. The path forward. The first week in their new home was surreal for the Jefferson family. Every corner of the house seemed to hold a little piece of magic. The creak of the porch swing in the early mornings, the hum of the modern appliances in the kitchen, and even the soft carpet beneath their feet felt like luxuries they weren't yet accustomed to. For Layla, it was paradise. For Janice, it was a long overdue reprieve. And for Malik, it was the beginning of something he didn't yet fully understand. A journey that stretched beyond the walls of this new house. The day before Malik's first day at his new school, a package arrived. A delivery man handed it to Janice with a friendly smile, and she brought it into the living room, where Malik and Layla were playing a game of cards. "Malik," Janice said, placing the box on the coffee table. "This is for you." "For me?" Malik asked, sitting up straight. His fingers traced the edge of the cardboard, the bold logo of a well-known sports brand catching his eye. Carefully, he opened the box, revealing its contents: a pair of gleaming white soccer cleats, a matching uniform with his name stitched on the back, and a soccer ball embossed with a professional team's logo. Layla gasped. "Malik, those are so cool." Malik stared at the cleats in awe. They were unlike anything he'd ever owned. His old sneakers, with their worn soles and tattered laces, had carried him through countless games on dusty fields. But these were something else entirely. Janice smiled, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Mr. Hargrove must have sent them. He really believes in you, Malik." Malik swallowed hard, his chest tightening with a mix of gratitude and nervousness. "I don't know if I can live up to all this," he admitted quietly. Janice knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to live up to anything, baby. Just be yourself. That's all anyone could ever ask for." The next morning, Malik stood in front of the mirror in his new room, adjusting the uniform he'd been given. The fabric felt strange against his skin, smooth, pristine, and unblemished by the wear and tear he was used to. He turned to look at his name stitched in bold letters across the back: G. Efferson. It was surreal. "Malik, hurry up." Layla's voice called from downstairs. "You're gonna be late." He grabbed his backpack and the new soccer ball, taking one last look at his reflection before heading out. His mom and Layla stood by the door, both smiling with pride. "You're going to do great, Malik," Janice said, pulling him into a hug. "Just remember, no matter what happens, we're proud of you." "Thanks, Mom," Malik said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. Layla grinned up at him. "And if anyone is mean to you, tell me, and I'll make them stop." Malik laughed, ruffling her hair. Deal. The ride to the new school was quiet, but Malik's mind buzzed with nerves. The campus loomed ahead, its manicured lawns and towering buildings intimidating. He clutched the soccer ball tightly as the car stopped at the entrance. "Here we go," he muttered to himself. Stepping out of the car, he was immediately greeted by a sea of unfamiliar faces. Kids milled about, chatting and laughing, their polished shoes clicking on the pavement. Malik felt out of place, his confidence wavering. But as he approached the main building, a boy about his age jogged up to him. He had sandy blonde hair and an easy smile. "Hey, you're the new kid, right?" the boy said, extending a hand. "I'm Ryan. Welcome to Ridgeview Academy." Yeah. I'm Malik," he replied, shaking Ryan's hand. "Cool. You play soccer, don't you?" Ryan asked, nodding toward the ball in Malik's hands. "How'd you know?" "Coach mentioned we were getting a new player. You're gonna love the team. Best part of this school, if you ask me." Malik felt a flicker of relief. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Practice that afternoon was unlike anything Malik had ever experienced. The Ridgeview soccer team played on a pristine field with lines so sharp they looked like they'd been painted moments ago. The other players were fast, skilled, and confident, moving across the field with practiced ease. Malik tightened the laces on his new cleats, his heart racing as Coach Simmons blew the whistle. "All right, team, gather up," the coach barked. He was a tall, broad man with a booming voice and an intense gaze. "We've got a new addition today. Malik Jefferson, show us what you've got." Malik stepped forward, swallowing his nerves. The other players watched him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. He felt the weight of their gazes, but he reminded himself why he was here, not just for himself, but for his family. The scrimmage began, and Malik quickly realized just how different this level of play was. The passes were faster, the tackles sharper, and the strategies more complex than anything he'd encountered on the dusty fields of Ashwood. He stumbled a few times, his movements clumsy compared to the others, but he kept pushing. Each mistake fueled his determination to do better. By the end of practice, he was drenched in sweat and aching all over, but a small smile tugged at his lips. He'd scored a goal, just one, but it was enough to earn a nod of approval from Coach Simmons. "Not bad, Jefferson," the coach said. "You've got potential. Let's see what you can do with it." That evening, Malik returned home exhausted but exhilarated. Layla greeted him at the door with a barrage of questions. "Did you play soccer? Did you make any friends? Did you score a goal?" Yeah, and yeah," Malik replied, grinning. "It was awesome." Janice watched him from the kitchen, her heart swelling with pride. For the first time in a long time, she saw a light in Malik's eyes that hadn't been there before. After dinner, Malik sat on the porch swing, staring out at the quiet street. The stars above were brighter here, untainted by the haze of city lights. He thought about everything that had led him to this moment. The wheelchair in the street, the old man's gratitude, the black car that had arrived like a miracle. He still didn't fully understand why Mr. Hargrove had chosen to help them, but he was determined to make the most of this second chance. His family had a home. His mom had a break from constant worry, and he had an opportunity to chase his dreams. For the first time, Malik allowed himself to dream big. He imagined himself playing on a professional soccer team, his name cheered by thousands. He imagined Layla growing up in a safe, nurturing environment, and his mom finally having the peace she deserved. He closed his eyes, letting the cool night air wash over him. His journey was just beginning, but he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't stop until he made Mr. Hargrove's faith in him worthwhile. Tomorrow was a new day, and Malik Jefferson was ready for it. The test of perseverance. Malik's first few weeks at Ridgeview Academy felt like a whirlwind. The days were packed with classes, soccer practice, and trying to adjust to an environment that still felt foreign. The polished hallways, the advanced technology in the classrooms, and the way his peers carried themselves. It all seemed a world apart from the life he had known in Ashwood. Malik couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't quite belong, as though he was a visitor in someone else's dream. One crisp Monday morning, Malik stood at the entrance to his homeroom, clutching his books tightly. The chatter of his classmates filled the air, their laughter and conversations flowing easily. He tried to join in when he could, but most of the time, he felt like an outsider looking in. "Hey, Malik," Ryan called, jogging up to him. "You ready for the game this Friday?" Malik forced a smile. "Yeah, I guess." "You guess?" Ryan said, grinning. "Man, you're gonna kill it out there. Coach says you've got some serious talent." Malik's smile wavered. He appreciated Ryan's encouragement, but deep down, he wasn't so sure. While he'd managed to hold his own during practices, the gap in experience between him and the other players was glaringly obvious. His teammates were used to structured drills and refined strategies, while Malik's skills had been honed on rough, uneven fields with no formal training. Still, he nodded. "Yeah, I'll do my best." At lunch, Malik sat alone under a tree at the edge of the schoolyard, picking at his sandwich. He watched groups of students laughing and joking, their ease with one another only magnifying his own sense of isolation. He was grateful for Ryan's friendliness, but he couldn't help feeling like an imposter. "Mind if I sit here?" A voice interrupted his thoughts. Malik looked up to see a girl with curly black hair and bright, curious eyes. She held a tray of food and wore a wide smile. Sure," Malik said, shifting over to make room. "I'm Jasmine," she said, setting her tray down. "You're the new kid, right? The soccer player." "Yeah," Malik said. "I'm Malik." "I seen you at practice," Jasmine said, taking a bite of her apple. "You're pretty good." Malik shrugged. "Not as good as the others." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "You kidding? You've got raw talent. And raw talent is way better than just being polished. Polished is boring." Malik chuckled despite himself. "Thanks, I guess." She leaned back against the tree, studying him. "You're not from around here, are you?" "No," Malik admitted. "I came from Ashwood." Her expression softened. "That's not far, but it's different." Malik nodded, grateful she didn't press further. Talking about Ashwood was complicated, full of memories he cherished but also wanted to leave behind. "Well, if you ever need someone to show you the ropes around here, let me know," Jasmine said, standing up and brushing crumbs off her lap. "And Malik, don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. You've earned your spot here." Her words stayed with him long after she walked away. That Friday, the day of the soccer game, Malik felt a knot of nerves in his stomach. The Ridgeview team was up against their biggest rival, a team notorious for its aggressive playing style and skilled forwards. Malik's name was listed as a starter, and while part of him was thrilled, the other part was paralyzed with fear. As the team gathered in the locker room, Coach Simmons gave his usual pep talk, his voice booming with authority. Malik tried to focus, but the weight of the moment pressed down on him. What if he messed up? What if he cost the team the game? The whistle blew, and the match began. The opposing team was every bit as tough as Malik had heard. They moved with precision, their passes sharp and calculated. Malik worked hard to keep up, his muscles burning as he sprinted across the field. He intercepted passes, defended aggressively, and even managed a few clean passes to his teammates. But the pressure was relentless. By halftime, Ridgeview was down by 1 goal. The team huddled on the sidelines, sweat dripping from their faces. "Jefferson," Coach Simmons barked, his intense gaze locking onto Malik. "You're holding back." "I'm trying, Coach," Malik said, breathless. "Don't try," Coach snapped. "Do. You've got what it takes, but you're playing like you're afraid. Forget the scoreboard. Forget the other team. Play your game. Show me the fire I know you've got." Malik nodded, his chest tightening. He could feel his teammates' eyes on him, their unspoken expectations heavy on his shoulders. The second half began, and Malik resolved to give it everything he had. He chased the ball with a single-minded determination, blocking shots and stealing passes with newfound confidence. His teammates began to rally around him, their energy feeding off his intensity. With only minutes left on the clock, Ridgeview earned a corner kick. Malik positioned himself in the box, his heart pounding as the ball soared through the air. Time seemed to slow as he jumped, his body twisting midair. His forehead connected with the ball, sending it hurtling past the goalkeeper and into the net. The crowd erupted in cheers as Malik landed, his teammates swarming him in celebration. For the first time, he felt like he belonged, not just to the team, but to this new life. After the game, as the team celebrated in the locker room, Malik found a quiet moment to reflect. He thought about everything that had brought him to this point. The old man in the wheelchair, the black car, and Mr. Hargrove's generosity. He thought about his mom and Layla, waiting for him at home, their smiles lighting up the new house. He realized something important. While the journey had been challenging, it was far from over. Every step forward was a test, not just of his abilities, but of his character. And he was determined to rise to the challenge. As he left the locker room, still buzzing with the thrill of victory, Malik looked up at the night sky. The stars above seemed brighter than ever, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always light to guide him forward. The road ahead was long, but Malik Jefferson was ready to face it with courage, determination, and hope. The ripple effect. Malik woke up the morning after the game feeling sore but exhilarated. The memories of last night, the roar of the crowd, the embrace of his teammates, the pride shining in Coach Simmons' eyes, played on a loop in his mind. He had never experienced anything like it. For once, he didn't feel like the outsider trying to fit in. He felt like a part of something bigger. As he stretched and got out of bed, Malik noticed his soccer cleats neatly placed by the door. The sight made him smile. He had earned his place on the Ridgeview team, and with that goal, he had proven that he wasn't just filling a slot. He was making an impact. Downstairs, the smell of breakfast greeted him. Janice stood at the stove, flipping pancakes while Layla sat at the table, humming as she played with her doll. "Morning, superstar," Janice said with a grin as she turned to face him. "Morning, Mom," Malik said, embarrassed but pleased. Layla beamed. "Malik, you were so awesome last night. I told everyone at school about your goal." "Thanks, Layla," Malik said, ruffling her hair. But it was a team effort. Janice placed a plate of pancakes in front of him and sat down. "I'm proud of you, Malik," she said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "Not just for the game, but for how far you've come. You've worked so hard, and it's paying off." Malik swallowed a bite of pancake, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of her words. He thought about everything his mom had sacrificed to get them to this point. This wasn't just his victory, it was hers too. That afternoon, Malik decided to visit Mr. Hargrove to thank him. He knew where the old man lived now, having been invited to his estate once before. The sprawling mansion was nothing like the cramped apartment they'd left behind. It sat on a hill overlooking the city, its large windows reflecting the sunlight like a beacon. As Malik approached the front door, it opened before he could knock. A butler greeted him with a polite nod. "Master Jefferson, Mr. Hargrove has been expecting you. Please, come in." The interior of the mansion was just as grand as Malik remembered, with marble floors, intricate artwork, and a chandelier that sparkled like a constellation. He was led to a sunroom at the back of the house, where Mr. Hargrove sat in a plush armchair, a book resting on his lap. "Ah, Malik," Mr. Hargrove said, his face lighting up with a smile. "To what do I owe this visit?" "I just wanted to say thank you," Malik said, stepping forward. "For everything. The house, the school, the soccer gear. It's all more than I could have ever imagined." Mr. Hargrove set his book aside and gestured for Malik to sit. "You've earned every bit of it, my boy. But tell me, how are you settling in? How's the team treating you?" Malik hesitated, then smiled. It's been tough, but I'm starting to find my place. I scored a goal last night, and it felt incredible. Mr. Hargrove's smile widened. That's wonderful news, Malik. But remember, success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about what you give back. You've been given an opportunity to change your life. Now, how will you use it to help others? The question caught Malik off guard. He hadn't thought much about what he could do for others since his life had changed so drastically. But as he sat there, he realized Mr. Hargrove was right. His journey wasn't just about him or his family. It was about the ripple effect of kindness and resilience. I don't know yet, Malik admitted, but I want to figure it out. Mr. Hargrove nodded approvingly. Good. Take your time. The best answers often come when you least expect them. Later that evening, Malik sat on the porch swing, the sun dipping low in the sky. He watched Layla play in the yard, her laughter filling the air. His mom sat on the steps, sipping a cup of tea and looking more relaxed than he'd seen her in years. Mom, Malik said, breaking the silence. Do you think it's possible to really make a difference, like not just in our lives, but in other people's? Janice looked at him, her expression thoughtful. I think anyone can make a difference, Malik. It doesn't matter how big or small. What matters is that you try. Why do you ask? I've been thinking about what Mr. Hargrove said, Malik admitted, about giving back. I want to do something, but I don't know where to start. Janice smiled. Start with what you know. You've been through a lot, Malik. Maybe there's someone out there who needs the kind of help you've needed. Maybe you can be that person for them. Malik nodded, her words sinking in. He thought about Ashwood, the neighborhood he'd left behind, and the people who were still there. Kids like him who played soccer on dirt lots, dreaming of a life they might never see. Maybe he could do something for them. The following week, Malik approached Coach Simmons with an idea. He wanted to start a community soccer program for kids from underserved neighborhoods. It would give them a place to play, learn, and grow, just like Ridgeview's team had done for him. Coach Simmons listened intently, his face serious. That's an ambitious idea, Malik, but it's a good one. What do you need from me? I don't know yet, Malik admitted. Maybe help with organizing? And I'll need equipment, balls, cleats, uniforms. The coach nodded. I'll make some calls, and I'll see if the school can sponsor a donation drive. We'll get this off the ground. Malik's heart soared. Thank you, Coach. This means a lot. Don't thank me yet, Coach said with a smirk. This is your project, Jefferson. I'm just here to help. Over the next few months, Malik poured his heart into the project. He spent his evenings reaching out to local businesses, organizing fundraisers, and recruiting volunteers. His teammates pitched in, donating their old gear and spreading the word. Even Jasmine and Ryan got involved, helping Malik plan events and run practice sessions. By the time the program launched, Malik had managed to secure enough funding and equipment to support a dozen kids from Ashwood. Seeing their faces light up as they ran onto the field for the first time made every sleepless night and every ounce of effort worth it. One evening, as Malik watched the kids practice, a familiar voice called his name. He turned to see Mr. Hargrove standing on the sidelines, leaning on his cane. I heard about what you've been doing, Mr. Hargrove said, his eyes twinkling with pride. It seems I was right about you, Malik. Malik smiled, feeling a swell of gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you, sir. You gave me the chance to be here. Mr. Hargrove shook his head. I may have opened the door, but you're the one who walked through it. And now you're opening doors for others. That, my boy, is what life is all about. As the sun set over the field, Malik stood beside Mr. Hargrove, watching the kids play with the same joy and determination he had once felt. For the first time, he understood the full weight of what Mr. Hargrove had given him, not just a second chance, but the power to change lives. And Malik Jefferson wasn't going to stop there. Legacy in motion. Months passed, and Malik's community soccer program, now officially named Kickstart Dreams, began to thrive. What started as a modest effort to give kids a place to play had grown into something much larger. The program became a beacon of hope for families in Ashwood, a reminder that opportunity could bloom in even the most unlikely places. Malik, now balancing school, soccer practice, and running the program, found himself busier than ever. But the exhaustion didn't bother him. Every time he saw a kid's face light up with joy or watched a parent shed tears of gratitude, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. One Saturday morning, Malik arrived at the soccer field early to set up. The once barren lot had been transformed into a lively community hub. A local business had donated nets for the goals, and volunteers had spent weekends leveling the ground and repainting the faded boundary lines. Brightly colored jerseys with the Kickstart Dreams logo were handed out to the kids, many of whom wore them with pride both on and off the field. As Malik carried a box of equipment to the sidelines, he heard a voice behind him. "You've been busy, Jefferson." He turned to see Coach Simmons walking toward him, his trademark whistle dangling around his neck. "Coach," Malik said, setting the box down, "what are you doing here?" "I couldn't resist," Simmons said with a smirk. "I wanted to see this operation of yours for myself, and honestly, I'm impressed." Malik grinned, scratching the back of his neck. "It's still a work in progress, but it's coming together." Coach Simmons surveyed the field, his eyes landing on a group of kids practicing drills. "You're doing more than giving them a place to play, Malik. You're teaching them discipline, teamwork, and hope. That's not something they'll forget." As the day progressed, Malik moved between groups of kids, offering encouragement and tips. One boy, Alex, caught his eye. Alex was quiet, smaller than the other kids, and hesitant to engage. Malik recognized the look in his eyes, the same mix of fear and longing he had once felt when he didn't think he belonged. "Hey, Alex," Malik said, kneeling beside him. "You doing okay?" Alex shrugged, kicking at the dirt. "I'm not as good as the others." Malik smiled. "You know, I used to think the same thing. When I started playing at Ridgeview, I was so nervous I almost quit. But you know what I learned?" Alex looked up, curious. "What?" "That being good doesn't mean never making mistakes," Malik said. "It means showing up, trying your best, and getting a little better every day. You've got that in you. I can see it." Alex's face lit up with a shy smile. "Really?" "Really," Malik said, ruffling the boy's hair. "Now, get out there and show me what you've got." Alex nodded and ran back onto the field, his steps lighter and more confident. Malik watched him go, a wave of pride washing over him. Later that afternoon, as the kids wrapped up their drills and gathered for snacks, Malik's mom and Layla arrived. Janice carried a tray of sandwiches, while Layla ran ahead, her hair bouncing as she waved. "Malik," she called. "Mom said we could help today." "Hey, Layla," Malik said, crouching to hug her. "You can help me pass out water bottles, okay?" "Okay," Layla said eagerly, grabbing a crate of bottles and darting off to the sidelines. Janice approached, her face glowing with pride. "This is incredible, Malik," she said, looking around at the bustling field. "I can't believe how much you've done." Malik shrugged, though he couldn't hide his smile. "It's not just me. So many people have helped. I couldn't have done this alone." Janice placed a hand on his shoulder. "Still, you had the vision. You saw what could be possible. And look at it now." That evening, after the kids had gone home and the field was quiet again, Malik sat on the bleachers, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Mr. Hargrove arrived shortly after, his cane tapping gently against the ground as he made his way over. "You've been busy, my boy," Mr. Hargrove said, lowering himself onto the bench beside Malik. "And it seems you've built something extraordinary." "Thanks, Mr. Hargrove," Malik said. "But it's just the beginning. There's still so much more I want to do." Mr. Hargrove chuckled, his eyes twinkling. That's the spirit. But don't forget to take a moment to appreciate what you've already accomplished. You've planted seeds, Malik. Seeds that will grow far beyond what you can see now. Malik nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I just want to make sure no kid feels like they don't have a chance. Growing up in Ashwood, it was hard. But I know there are kids out there with dreams just as big as mine. They just need someone to believe in them. And you've become that someone, Mr. Hargrove said. You've turned a simple act of kindness into a legacy. Over the next year, Kickstart Dreams continued to grow. With additional donations and support, Malik expanded the program to include academic tutoring, mentorship, and weekend tournaments. His story spread, drawing attention from local news outlets and even a professional soccer player who volunteered to host a clinic for the kids. Through it all, Malik remained humble, focused on the work and the people who made it possible. His family thrived in their new home, and Layla often joined him at the field, eager to help. Janice, no longer burdened by the constant stress of making ends meet, found time to pursue her own dreams, enrolling in a business management course at a local college. One day, as Malik prepared for a tournament, he received a letter from Ridgeview Academy's administration. Inside was an offer of a full scholarship to a prestigious university, recognizing both his academic achievements and his leadership through Kickstart Dreams. Malik stared at the letter, his heart pounding. The scholarship was a dream come true, but it also meant leaving the program behind. He wrestled with the decision, torn between his own future and the community he had built. That evening, he sat down with his mom to talk it over. Malik, Janice said, holding the letter in her hands, you've worked so hard for this. You deserve it. But what about the program? Malik asked. I can't just leave it. You won't be leaving it, Janice said gently. You'll be building on it. Going to college will give you the tools to make it even bigger, to help even more kids. This isn't the end, Malik. It's the next step. With his mom's encouragement, Malik accepted the scholarship, promising himself that he would return to Ashwood and continue his work. On the day he left for university, the kids from Kickstart Dreams surprised him with a handmade banner that read, "Thank you, Coach Malik." As he hugged each of them goodbye, Malik felt a deep sense of gratitude. His journey had started with a single act of courage, but it had grown into something far greater, a testament to the power of resilience, hope, and the unyielding belief that one person could make a difference. And Malik Jefferson wasn't finished yet. His legacy was just beginning. As Malik sat on the edge of his bed in his university dorm room, surrounded by freshly unpacked boxes, the weight of the moment hit him. This was his next chapter, one that had seemed so far away only a year ago. Outside his window, the bustling campus teemed with students, each chasing their own dreams. Malik's path had brought him here, not just for himself, but for the community that had shaped him and the future he hoped to build. He ran his fingers over his laptop, where emails from Ridgeview Academy and Kickstart Dreams awaited his attention. The program wasn't just running, it was thriving. Jasmine had stepped up to manage the day-to-day operations, while Malik focused on his studies. Ryan was helping with the coaching, and his former Ridgeview teammates occasionally volunteered their time. Even from miles away, Malik stayed connected, holding weekly video calls with the team to discuss new initiatives and events. Technology allowed him to stay present in their lives, and he used every spare moment between classes to ensure the program continued to grow. The ripple expands. One afternoon, as Malik walked across campus toward the student center, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from a local nonprofit organization that had heard about Kickstart Dreams. Dear Mr. Jefferson, we've been following your journey and the incredible impact of your program. We'd like to collaborate with you to expand your initiative to other underserved neighborhoods in the region. Please let us know a convenient time to discuss further. Malik stopped in his tracks, rereading the email. His mind raced with possibilities. Expanding the program was something he'd dreamed about, but it felt like a distant goal, something for the future. Yet here it was, an opportunity to take his vision beyond Ashwood and into other communities. He immediately called Jasmine. "You're not going to believe this," he said, excitement bubbling in his voice. Jasmine listened as he explained the email, her own enthusiasm growing. "Malik, this is huge. If we can get more support, we could reach so many more kids." "Yeah, but it's a big step," Malik said, pacing. "I don't want to stretch us too thin." "Malik," Jasmine said firmly, "this program exists because you took a chance. We can do this." Her confidence bolstered his resolve. Malik replied to the email that evening, arranging a meeting with the nonprofit. Balancing the future. As Malik delved deeper into his university coursework, he began to see how his education could directly benefit his mission. He focused on business and nonprofit management, learning how to navigate the challenges of funding, organizing, and sustaining a program like Kickstart Dreams. Each class felt like another tool added to his arsenal. But it wasn't easy. There were nights when the weight of his responsibilities threatened to overwhelm him. Juggling school, the program, and his personal life left little time for rest. Yet whenever doubt crept in, Malik thought about the kids in Ashwood. Their laughter, their determination, and their hope. They were his motivation, his reason for pushing forward. The expansion. By the end of his first semester, Malik had worked out a partnership with the nonprofit organization. Together, they launched pilot programs in 3 additional neighborhoods, using the model Malik had developed in Ashwood. The expansion brought new challenges: hiring coaches, training volunteers, and ensuring the program's core values remained intact. But it also brought incredible rewards. On the day the new programs launched, Malik traveled to one of the sites to meet the kids and their families. As he stood on the sidelines, watching the kids run across the field in their brightly colored jerseys, he felt a deep sense of pride. These weren't just soccer programs. They were lifelines, providing kids with opportunities to learn, grow, and dream. One mother approached him, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "My son hasn't smiled like this in years. What you've built here, it's a blessing." Malik shook his head, humbled. "It's not just me. It's everyone who believed in this, who made it possible." Recognition and reflection. As the program continued to flourish, Malik's story began to gain national attention. He was invited to speak at events, sharing his journey and the mission of Kickstart Dreams. Standing on stages in front of large audiences, he told them about Ashwood, about Mr. Hargrove, and about the power of kindness and determination. But despite the accolades and the growing recognition, Malik remained grounded. He knew that his success wasn't just his own. It was shared by the community that had supported him, the mentors who had guided him, and the family who had stood by him through it all. One day, after a particularly long week, Malik found himself back on the porch swing of his family's home, staring at the familiar street. Layla, now a little older and more confident, sat beside him, her feet swinging back and forth. "You've done a lot, Malik," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "But do you ever think about what's next?" Malik smiled. "All the time. There's so much more to do, Layla. I want to make sure no kid ever feels like they're stuck, like they don't have a way out." Layla nodded thoughtfully. "You're like a superhero, you know. But instead of saving people once, you keep helping them over and over." Malik chuckled, pulling her into a side hug. "I'm just trying to do my part, Layla. One step at a time." The journey continues. By the time Malik graduated from university, Kickstart Dreams had grown into a regional initiative, touching the lives of hundreds of kids across multiple cities. He returned to Ashwood often, mentoring the next generation of leaders and ensuring the program stayed true to its roots. Through it all, he never forgot the lessons that had shaped him: the value of hard work, the importance of giving back, and the power of believing in something greater than yourself. On a quiet evening, as Malik stood on the sidelines of the original Ashwood field, Watching kids play under the glow of newly installed lights, Mr. Hargrove appeared beside him. "You've done well, Malik," the old man said, his voice filled with pride. "But I have a feeling your story is far from over." Malik smiled, the weight of his journey balanced by the joy of its impact. "No, sir, it's just getting started." Epilogue: planting the seeds of change. Years later, Malik's name would become synonymous with hope and opportunity. Kickstart Dreams evolved into a national organization, inspiring similar programs across the country. Malik's legacy wasn't just in the goals scored or the fields built. It was in the lives changed, the communities strengthened, and the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could spark something extraordinary. And through it all, Malik Jefferson remained true to his roots, a boy from Ashwood who dared to dream, and in doing so, helped others dream too. This was the ripple effect of one act of courage, a legacy that would echo for generations.